In three, two, and one. Okay, hi everyone. Welcome to a new episode of Global Citizens. My name is Calvin, and I am the show's host, and I'm also its creator. So my guest for today is Ms Jamie Gelbtuch. Jamie is the creator of Cultural Mixology, an agency that actually advise and consult on multicultural issue. She has worked with multiple organizations and such as Pepsi, NYC Emergency, and IBM. A lot of which is based on Jamie's own experience as a global citizen who traveled and grew up in 5 continents in over 30 countries. Am I right to say that, or did I do enough justice on your introduction, Jamie?
You got it right.
Oh, great. Fantastic. All right. So for now, I will just hand you the platform for a bit to actually elaborate a little bit more on yourself. Yeah. So, Jamie, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you for the nice introduction. I'm based here in New York in the US. And so I founded Cultural Mixology 12 years ago. And we do different kinds of work, executive coaching, training, and consulting with expats and global teams who are managing a global lifestyle and cultural differences. And my own background is very strong in languages. I learned French as a child from my mom and studied it in school, and also studied business and did an MBA and had many different overseas experiences.
All right. Okay, Jamie. So for your case, right, do you consider yourself as a third culture kid or more of just a global citizens in general?
Definitely more of a global citizen in general. Growing up, I actually didn't have the opportunity to really travel overseas because my dad had a job where he was traveling constantly. And so when he wasn't traveling, he preferred for our family to be home. So I definitely came to those experiences later in life, even though I learned a second language when I was young.
All right. Okay, for those who just tuned in for the show for the very first time, so Global Citizen is a live webcast whereby I would interview people such as Jamie, who has experienced a global citizen's life, such as a third culture kid, digital nomads, and of course expatriate, and of course on occasion international speakers. Why I actually created this is because I want people to see the difference between when you are somebody who is living in a foreign country and when you're visiting a foreign country. Because when you live in a foreign country, you have to be a chameleon. You have to adapt to their culture, you have to adapt to their mindset, and as a result, uh, it kind of in a sense changed the way how you see and perceive things. Whereas if you are there as a visitor, yes, you are exposed to their culture, but you are there for a short while. After a certain period of time, you are back home to where you are from, and well, things are back to normal. So, okay, Jamie. So, this is something that I actually try to reserve for TCK, but well, maybe we can use this on you also for this particular case, yeah? So, what is your definition of home? Is it New York City, or it could be a cafe in Maldives, maybe, which is provides a Wi-Fi that is well away from home?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for me, I think New York is definitely feels like home to me. It's where I feel like my roots are, and it's where I feel that I understand the culture best, the written rules and all of the unwritten rules. So I definitely feel like a New Yorker at heart.
All right, fantastic to hear that. Okay, so now I actually want to dive in on cultural mixology though. What was the determining factor that puts you on this career course? And well, have you ever experienced a eureka moment that makes you know that this is your purpose and that you have made a difference?
So the first question, it's how I came to cultural mixology was a little bit accidental. I'm not sure that anybody grows up and says, I want to do cultural training and coaching with expats. So it was definitely a little bit of an accident. After I finished my MBA, which I did in South Africa, I was back in the US and then figuring out really what I wanted to do with my life. And I started doing some language training in French for executives and their families. And I realized that I really liked that work, and I liked, being able to connect with these expats, and I felt very comfortable in that space. And the more interviews that I went on for typical business school jobs, the more I realized that I liked my part-time job better. So I realized there was a whole intercultural field out there, so professional organizations and things that I could join to connect with people that were working in this field. And that's how I ended up starting cultural mixology. So the second part of your question about a eureka moment, I think definitely the eureka moments with my clients are when, especially with coaching, when they don't need me anymore. And I know that sounds kind of funny, but that means that I've done my job really well. It means that I've given them the tools that they need to successfully adapt, to overcome the challenges that they have, and to manage the transition from here on out on their own. So for me, that's always the nirvana moment, to feel like my clients have succeeded.
Okay. So job done. Hooray. Okay, that's good. Okay. All right. Okay, that's good to hear that. At least it's a testament that when you already did your work, time to let it go. So that's actually something that a lot of TCKs actually have difficulty. And in fact, I think this is something that those who experience a global citizen's life has actually experienced, is because this was actually done by by the youngest guest who has ever come to my show. Her name is Winnie. So she created Third Culture Chinese, which has 30,000 followers on her Instagram. So in it, she actually depicts that each part of her body is part of a emoji, or I don't know what is it. It's avatar.
Avatar.
Or avatar. Fantastic. Okay. So each part of the body part is separated and it's left in the different countries that she has ever grown in. So as a result, it forms as a sense of attachment. So I think this is something that we experience, and I don't know whether it's just me or a lot of TCKs has issue with letting go, or in fact, like we are so attached to certain things that we just doesn't like it to be taken away. For me, is I like to keep old stuff. I guess I have a mother and a sister, both of whom are clean freaks. So as a result, they can't stand when they see something that is so out of place. So yeah, I hope you experience that though, or to you you're okay with it?
I think that sounds really common, because as a TCK, there's so much change that's out of your control that you latch on to things that you can control. And maybe some of that is holding on to, to physical items, or, it could be memories, attachments to places, because those things feel like you can maybe have some power and control over it.
Yep. Okay. So with respect to your life as a global citizen, yeah, you've spent time in 5 continents. You are short of 2 more. There's 7 continents in total in the world, right?
Yes.
Okay. How much has your mindset and perspective changed from the time from where you grow up in New York City to when you spend time overseas? Because the thing is I didn't mention this earlier. Jamie actually is able to converse in 5 languages, right? Or or is it more? Because
no,
in 30,
it's not more. That's enough.
Okay, 5. That's still a lot, actually.
Yes, it's a lot.
There's a theory that whereby when you actually speaks another language, your character change accordingly with how the ethics of that particular culture is. So, for your case, how has your mindset changed with the time that you spend abroad and its positive impact?
So it's definitely changed. I think it would be incredibly hard to spend time overseas and not have a change. It would almost be harder than, experiencing the change on certain levels. So for me, I always try to think that when you're uncomfortable going through a transition, it's your brain signaling to you that it's a growth opportunity. And so those uncomfortable moments, I think, are really powerful. And even for me today, even though I don't live overseas at the moment, my travels and the time I spend overseas still provides me some of those moments to feel uncomfortable. And that helps me a lot in my work because it reminds me how I can empathize with what my clients are going through and to feel some of that discomfort that I know they're feeling, as they move through their transition processes.
All right. Okay, so on the opposite of that, though, do you have an event that if you tell others about it, people will call it a failure, but for your case, it's a priceless learning opportunity? In my show, we don't like to use the term failure on this, by the way. Yeah, Jamie?
Yeah, so I would say that starting and growing a business has been one of the biggest learning opportunities of my life. And it's funny because when we talk about culture, a lot of times we use that old metaphor of the iceberg and how you see a little bit on top, but there's so much underneath in a culture. And I think that success is similar and learning is similar. So on the top, you may arrive at a point where you see success in something, but what people don't often see underneath is the disappointment or the challenges and the failures. I mean, it may not sound like a nice word, but there is failure definitely involved. The hard work that went into it. So I think all of those things in my success of starting a business definitely exist underneath. It's just easy to look from the outside and maybe not see them. But as the person who's been through it, I definitely feel all of that underneath.
Okay. An extension of that, though, do you ever experience a cultural misunderstanding that in the end become a learning opportunity also?
Of course. There are so many, especially when it comes to language, right? And I think Spanish for me is a good example of that because there are so many dialects of Spanish, and you could use the same word, like the word pendejo can be a bad word, right? In a place like Mexico, but for a Chilean, that word could just mean kids, the children. So you could inadvertently use a word that you think you know and cause offense to somebody. And of course, things like that happen to me. My whole job is really learning all about these different things.
Okay, a note of that. There's actually one very interesting word in Tagalog, Philippines national language. There is a word called mahal, which means love. In Indonesia, the word mahal means expensive. So yeah, love is expensive.
It can be.
Depends on that. All right. Yeah, if you guys for those who are watching this, tell us about your expensive love story if you have it. If not, good for you. Good for you. All right. All right. So, while I know that from our earlier discussion, and of course from this interview, it's your passion to actually study culture to understand people of other countries here, and also you spend time abroad. So, have you experienced a reverse culture shock though? Because the thing is that like maybe if you have spent time in countries which has a slow-paced life, you might adapt to it after a certain while, and you're back to New York City, which has an incredibly fast-paced lifestyle. Mm-hmm. So how have you handled it?
I think the biggest culture shock was probably when I returned from France, just because I've spent the most time there over the years. I'm studying, working, internships, living with a host family. And so, I do remember coming home and being in the car with my mom and just almost having this attitude like, everything in the US was terrible and, everything in France or in Europe was so much better. And like, I distinctly remember having those feelings. And I mean, I think the way you handle it is really time. The same way when you go overseas, you need time to move through the different stages and adjust. It's the same thing when you come back. You need to allow yourself that space, and you really need to, find people that you can connect with that maybe have been through similar experiences, because it can be something very hard for people to understand. I think you have much less support when you come home, so it can be a lot harder on that side than going overseas, even though if you have never been overseas, you would never believe that, but it can actually be harder to come home. And I think one of the things that I've found also is just anything from your life abroad that you really enjoyed, if you can replicate it at home, if you can find a space for it, then that's great. I mean, even to this day, I still do French classes and involvements when I can. Like just last week, I did a virtual one through the French Institute here in New York, where it was like a dictation class on Zoom, and we had to do our dictée and try to get no mistakes in our writing. And so I still try to connect with the parts that I enjoyed most.
Okay. Okay. In note of what you mentioned regarding space earlier, yeah, on after experiencing a reverse culture shock.
Mm-hmm.
So I've been advocating for a creative outlet for a third culture kid or a global citizens in general. Is as in you can maybe something like a podcast, or if you're somebody who like to draw, or maybe even like a comic strip or something.
Mm-hmm.
The reason being is that for a global citizens, I always feel this creative outlet serves as a form of a testament to actually show to yourself that what you have been through is not a lie. It's not a fiction. It has happened before. So this is something that I think one of my past guests also, I had a discussion with her recently. Her name is Christine Chen. She's a TEDx speaker and a psychologist who advocated the mental health for TCK. For her, she actually does this method whereby she maintains a friendship with with her friends overseas by ensuring that each and every single one of their birthdays is recorded in her calendars, and she will take time for that during the day, because to her it somehow, in a sense, she told me that it keeps her focused, it keeps her calm. So do you agree with this? And what is your own method of trying to show as a sign that that your life as a global citizen has happened before?
Mm-hmm. I love what you say about the birthdays. It's funny because I do the same thing too, and
Oh,
I
wonderful.
I still handwrite my calendar, and I always write people's birthdays or anniversaries in red, so I see them very clearly. And sometimes people ask me how I remember all of these occasions, but I just write them in my calendar, and I always reach out on people's birthdays. So yeah, of course, I think a creative outlet is important in general, and it is a way to bring to life your interpretation of your experience and to represent it in, to bring it to life in whatever way you see it in your mind. So, I would definitely advocate for creative outlets. And I also wish, I'm in organizations and multinational companies a lot, and I see so many groups that organize around race or ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation. And I wish that there would also be groups that could speak to TCKs or global citizens, because that's a part of you that stays with you forever. And there are so many people in these multinational companies that have that could connect on that and really leverage those experiences and remind each other of, what they've been through, and that it is a very real part of their identity. So I would love to see more initiatives within companies around that too.
Okay. Earlier you mentioned regarding your reverse culture experience when you came back from France and back to New York City, right? So I mean, if I think from your mom's point of view, she would be really annoyed, I guess, because the thing is that well, she'll be like, "Wow, really, you are such an upscale lifestyle now in France, right?"
Mm-hmm.
So I think this is something that happened when you come back from a country which maybe if let's say we can use for myself, I came back from Singapore back to Indonesia, a country that is considered one of the four Asian tigers, back to a country that is still developing. And for France, I know it's a country that heavily advocate arts and of course literature as compared to a much more industrial based lifestyle that I think maybe in states in the United States like New York City and Philadelphia would be used to, right? Okay, so why do you feel though there's a lot of miscommunication that happen between cultures and generations, and how do you think this can be handled?
I think that a generation is really just another kind of culture. And, you know, one of the simplest definitions I ever read about what culture is that it's just everything people inside a group know that people outside the group don't know. And that could be the culture of your friends, it could be the culture of your family, of a generation, of a nation, of a city or a state, an organization. And so, I think that the reason that there can be miscommunication there is because there are so many layers of complexity, and a generation is just really one of them. Not to mention all of the individual characteristics that people bring in terms of their personality. So I think the way you manage that is the same way I would advise a company to address something. And I think I shared with you, I wrote an article with my colleague in the Netherlands about, not being too quick to think something is cultural, just because it's a multicultural team. And so I think the same thing applies in your example with generations and culture. And the first step is really to try to figure out like what your goal is, and then what's your current reality, like what's the gap between the two, and then how do you address it. And maybe it's something generational in mindset, but maybe it's not. So sometimes those things just become a scapegoat, and we say, oh, it's millennials, or oh, it's because he's Brazilian or something. And I think more often than not, it's so much more complex than that.
Yep. Was the phrase that you mentioned from Ruth Van Reken? I think I recall that somehow.
Oh, from Ruth Van Reken about the third culture kids.
Yeah, was it? I think I recalled something along that line, or I could
really
be wrong.
Pleasure of accidentally sitting next to her at a conference, and I was so excited when I found out it was her. So her book is obviously great. So
yeah, it's in a sense we call it the Bible of the global citizens. Yeah. Just to be honest, I haven't actually read the book. I'm sorry, I'm not a. I'm more of an audio person, so I don't really like to read. I like to listen. So the thing is that I've been trying to find an ebook version of it. So hopefully I can read it soon. Because I also am working on some new articles. So yeah, hopefully I get to read it.
Really appreciate it.
Okay. Sorry. Okay. Okay. This one is a little bit off of our focus of global citizens, but at the same time, I feel this is equally important, and it is on social media portrayal. So earlier you mentioned on how we can't just see things as culture, right? So the thing is this: with the advance of social media, people can acquire informations that is not commonly available in your current surroundings, maybe. For one thing is that we get to be educated more on what is happening on the other side of the world so that we can understand that it is no longer just a biased portrayal. So the thing is with the thing is with it is that at the same time, well, it can be at the same time in social media, well, people will depict the most ideal image of themselves. And there's a term called diplobrats in the TCK community. So it's basically because offsprings and children of diplomats who could be deployed to a much more privileged country would show off the privilege that they have in their life. Maybe, for example, a limousine ride or in a fancy dining area. And the reason for that is just to let people know is because it's not that they are, well, these diplomats are given such entitlements if they are lucky enough to go to a more developed country, and they are given that is because, of course, they need to be given protection. Their life is insured by their host countries. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, where with the advance of social media, people will depict an unfair image, and as a result, well, it resulted in an unfair portrayal on social media, and well, it led to unnecessary hatred and rise of prejudice, or well, a lot of unpleasant things. So, how do you think this could be handled more responsibly on social media, Jamie?
Wow, that's a really big question.
Yeah.
Know,
If it's easy, everybody would have done what I've done.
Yeah, I'm not sure I have the exact answer. I believe that's something that we see on social media in general. And so because of the topics that we're discussing, we're looking at how it applies in this particular lens. But I would say it should be an issue that is raised within the community. Just like in a global citizens community and the diplomatic community, there are lots of channels, and there's also lots of training that goes in. I know this because I've also had the opportunity to work with the U.S. State Department here and the Foreign Service Institute, and so there is a lot of training, and perhaps it's something that across the board could be implemented when people are preparing to go overseas. The awareness could be raised about the portrayals and the consequences of doing that. My guess is maybe it's not something that's factoring into the preparation of sending people to their postings right now,
Yep.
in terms of the social media component, because that's so new and evolving and growing.
All right. Okay. Okay. So, okay. I want so have. Okay. Do you agree with this particular statement? We will live on the internet. It is said by Jesse Eisenberg, who portrayed Mark Zuckerberg in the movie Social Network. So, with this recent COVID epidemics, we are stuck at home. And in a sense, that statement became a reality because, well, that's the only way now we can interact with other people. What are your thoughts on this, Jamie?
So there's been so much conversation about this now, and what will happen if people work from home permanently and we don't have as many expat assignments and postings, and there will be fewer third culture kids, and that I don't know that. None of us know how that will exactly play out, but what I do know is that the importance of culture will not go away. That, it's one thing to be online, but working virtually sometimes can magnify the impact of cultural differences because there are so many cues that we may not be able to see or read that are essential in communication, or the opportunities to share a meal that are important in so much relationship building. So even if we transition to more virtual work, I think it makes understanding culture that much more important. And I also have a hard time believing that there will not be any more expat assignments, because I think the value of knowledge transfer, to have people that work internationally immerse themselves and come to another office and exchange and work with colleagues, is too vital. So it may lessen, and especially lessen in the short term, but it won't take away the importance of culture or of assignments overseas in general, in my opinion.
All right. Okay. So for yourself, because you, as an entrepreneur, you have created several projects whereby you have to do it remotely, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. For use, the thing is that one of the, well, people call this a downside, but I think let's prefer to see the upside of it. Is because now we realize this could be an opportunity, and one of the thing that is commonly seen now is that, well, we can remotely work, and we have to remotely work because who knows, maybe in the future that another epidemic such as COVID might hit again, and well, now a lot of industry has to prepare themselves for an unknown impending doom of sort. So, how do you feel that for to create a much more global citizens friendly work environment that could be done in a much more digital way for yourself, because you have worked with people remotely also, right? So how have you maintained it, and what do you think could be done?
So I believe that it will make it more important than ever to have, global awareness kinds of trainings that impress upon people the different areas that you may
Not watching my show, guys.
that you may miss in a virtual context, because it's just like I said earlier, it's that much easier to miss so many of the cues from behind a screen. And so for me, that would mean, just implementing more awareness programs. I don't think that those types of trainings ultimately change behaviors, but I think the first step is to make people aware of different customs and, attitudes and beliefs that they may encounter. And I think it's also just that much more important virtually to create spaces, whether it's through chat rooms that you have in the beginning or in the middle, where people can just exchange some small talk, like breakout rooms, so that there can be that relationship building that would take place organically if you were face to face and you walked into a room or you walked to get a coffee together.
All right. All right. This is actually going to be the last question. Do you have any advice or books that you would give to an aspiring entrepreneur? Someone who could be experiencing an intercultural identity issue, or even a combination of both of them.
So I have two books that I wanted to share with people today, and I think the messages in each can apply. So one more entrepreneurial. So the one that I like a lot for entrepreneurs, this is called the Prosperous Coach. And even though it has to do with coaching, really a lot of the value in the book is about how you value yourself and the knowledge that you bring. And as an entrepreneur, you may be starting in a business, but you're not starting with experience or knowledge. You already have a lot of that. And they tell a great story in the book. It's just a few lines, but it's about a woman who's watching the artist Picasso at a cafe, and he's drawing on a napkin. And, he spends a few minutes, and then a woman goes over and says, "How much can I pay you for that napkin?" And he says, $20,000. And she says, "But it only took you 5 minutes." And he says, "No, madame, it took me my whole life." And so I think the message in that, and for entrepreneurs, is to remember that there are no inexperienced people. And even when you start a business, you've spent a lot of time, including as a global citizen, amassing all of this knowledge. And you have to recognize yourself for that and the value you bring. So that would be my recommendation for entrepreneurs. And my second book that I like is called Let Your Mind Run by the American Olympian Dina Castor. And even though it's a book about running, it's really a book about your mindset. And there are a couple important lessons in it. So one of them is just how your word choice affects your perception of things. So maybe as a global citizen, when you think about your identity, you think it's confusing, or, it's hard. And, you can reframe those words. You can think it's, my identity is in progress. My identity is unique. And so it's really the story that we choose to tell ourselves that has an impact. And the last lesson that I'll leave you with that comes from this book is also for entrepreneurs. And the lesson that she learns from her coach is that if it's the difference between success and excellence. And success is about having. So it's about having a thriving business or recognition or revenue. But excellence is more about being. It's about being true to your values. And if you pursue excellence and you stay true to who you are, then success will follow. And so I think that's probably a good lesson, both for global citizens about staying true to your own personal values, but also for entrepreneurs.
Yeah, I can personally agree on that particular area. So when I first started this, there's actually a ex-colleague of mine who actually wanted to come to the show. But the thing is that he's not a global citizen. He has always been a local all his life. But why he actually wanted to come here is actually just to be able to promote his product. And at that time, and of course, he mentioned that he wanted to pay me. But the thing is, was that I take it as an offense because I don't create this platform to be able to monetize it or at least to ask people to give me your money. I wanted this to as a sort of advocating in order for global citizens to see what is going on in where our lives are, and well, in order to for them to see that they actually have people who has experienced what they went through. So I cut off contacts with him, and well, it has worked well for me since, well, this is where I am now.
Well, that must have been a tough decision, and it's also an example of sticking to your values and your priorities in pursuit of excellence.
Thank you. All right. That is actually my last question. So before I end this, I need to thank everyone who is watching today. A special mention to Miss Christina Hawk and Miss Sandra Constantine. I hope I didn't butcher your name. Apologies on that if I did. Okay, so that is the end of Global Citizens episode 51. Jamie, do you have anything that you want to say to the audience for the before we end?
Just that it was a pleasure. And Calvin, I'm so glad we connected from halfway across the world. And I really enjoyed exchanging views and questions and answers with you tonight and this morning for you.
Yeah, for those of you guys that do not know, it's what time is it? Oh, it's 7:38 for me here in Indonesia, and Jamie is 8 p.m. She's in New York City.
Yeah.
So, all right, there will be a new episode of Global Citizens again tomorrow. It will be in the afternoon for my time. So my guest is actually from Zurich, but she is actually grown up and raised in Hong Kong, and she has been deployed in multiple overseas assignments. So yeah, do check out the announcement. And along with that, I also, of course, I have to thank Jamie for giving her time to come to the show to answer the questions on her own experience as a global citizen. All right, and with that, that is the end of episode 51 of Global Citizens. So do stay safe, everybody, and please take care of your health because while nowadays the quarantine might be dwindling down, we still need to be more vigilant. And with that, that's the end of the episode. So goodbye, everyone.
Bye.